And so I thought to myself, well, there's a saying that you can be strong like a sword, but a sword can break. Or you can be strong like an old tree, and all the layers of time and all the vulnerability, you'll be adaptably strong, which is my aspiration when I think about how I want to have power in life.
So, before though, we were talking about the garden. I digress, and I wanted you again to know that I'm an observer, and I love pretext and subtext, and the original meanings of things. So, what does Turabify mean? You know, we have trees and beautiful life here. It must be deep rooted in something. What are they rooted in? What do you bring to the table?
So my name, my mother chose my name. I think she went to like one of those astral cartographer people. They looked at the stars at the time of the year I was born or whatever, and they're like, oh, you should start it off with this letter. And my brother much the same. And she chose Turab, which is kind of the Urdu pronunciation of the name. And it has two different meanings based on which sound of T that you go with. So one of the meanings is happiness, which is the intended meaning. The other meaning is soil, Turab. Turab also was a nickname for the Prophet Muhammad's advisor, whose name is Hazrat Ali. I actually don't know his last name, but it was said that if the city of Islam is Muhammad, the gate of Islam is Ali. So understanding the logic behind spirituality, you must first understand the logic in order to get to the city. And so these kind of thoughts have really been essential for me to define what my purpose in life is, because I love the happiness component. I think a lot of the time, you know, when people interact at a business level, we get really serious, and we get really into the numbers and big data, and also into, obviously, like, you know, there's a lot of stress that comes with it. But I try to make sure, especially at the practice, that there is a sense of humor, that we have that human emotional intelligence, that caliber of being able to connect and actually enjoy life. I also, you know, I like cheesing, you know, I like having a big, I remember I had a conversation with you, I was like, we got to smile, dude.
Yeah. You told me it was one of the actually biggest things that's kind of helped me the last couple months, was to make smiling more a higher objective. And it's even, I notice it within everyone, number one, and then I even see it the most with content creating. That's why, you know, you see me smiling a lot throughout this whole interview, because it just is a more, I just want to watch that, you know, like, and it's more expression that you can use. And I've learned something when I was making music. Someone told me, like, if you're writing something happy, if you're writing something sad, don't go in the middle. You got to go the most extreme. If you're going sad, you got to say, I'm going to fucking die. This shit really is going to, you're like, hurt. Like, it's got to be like the most intense feeling.
Right.
Or else it's not going to be a hit, or it's not going to be related.
And the equal and opposite, right? Like deep compassion for people and having real joy and showing that peace and that comfort and showing that love, you know? So that's a part of it. The soil part of it's much more interesting to me, because of my interest in nature and in organisms. I have a love for soil. It's said that if you bury something in the soil, it stays there. There's this honor to it. There's a loyalty to it. There's also these incredible interactions that occur underneath the soil that helps us breathe. It's creating the substance for these roots of these trees to essentially get all the nutrients and also help all these other organisms work together. I mean, there's fungus that actually works alongside with tree roots to help them accumulate certain nutrients in the soil, and that's still a much higher up level than the bacteria that are responsible for breaking down the individual things into the nutrients, let alone all the other organisms that dwell within it. You know, I thought to myself, well, there's a saying that you can be strong like a sword, but a sword can break. or you can be strong like an old tree, and all the layers of time and all the vulnerability, you'll be adaptably strong, which is my aspiration when I think about how I want to have power in life. And so Turabify, besides the narcissistic aspect that it's my name, is actually supposed to be almost like transforming something or imbuing something with happiness and the philosophy of soil. And I believe really through the Turabify Network and all the networking and all the philanthropy that I'm going to do in my life, that it's going to create an environment that is nutritious for these plants, or these organisms, you know. I think as leaders, a lot of the time in society nowadays, we see problems in the road that we have come across, that we have had jump across. So we've had to figure out our ways through them. And many of us do not spend the time to slow down to make that obstacle a little bit easier for the people coming along, especially unnecessary obstacles. And I think that if we have a more connected philosophy on business, on how to conduct business, and how important compassion and actual relationships are in terms of accruing revenue, let alone the impacts of the services that businesses offer, that we can have a more connected local societies, but also an overarching human society. And so that's kind of where Turabify comes from when I was thinking up a name. I also like the IFY because I love Spotify. And I had this thought a while back that if I get big enough, I'll buy all the IFY companies and I'll put it underneath the Turabify. I don't know. It's a pipe dream, but it's fun.
It's one of the unrealistic goals.
Yeah, but it's kind of fun, you know. It's like, okay, well, let's see. So yeah, so that's the real essence of the brand and the whole reason that I'm doing these things, because I've been gifted so much in my life. You know, sure, you know, we all go through our heartaches and stuff, and I have tremendous amounts of gratitude for the love that I've been given, the guidance that I've been given in my life, the opportunities I've been given in my life. And I feel a responsibility to at least share my conclusions from that type of life with as many people as possible. I figure, you know, it's the way that I, as a leader, can make the path a little bit easier for the people coming before me, a little bit more tempting even for the people coming before me. So that's the brand.
So that's a lot of the Turabify. Could you go more in depth on the bright smiles?
Yeah, so the same philosophy actually goes into obviously everything that we do. What is that John Wick quote? The way that we do something is the way that we do everything.
I just know, just don't mess with this dog. That's all in.
Yeah. So, my mom, when I was in college, and mind you, I've been shit at school forever. Like, I did the work, I just never understood why I was doing it. And
I think
yeah. So in freshman and sophomore year, she was like, yo, go into dentistry. My brother was like, going to computer science, dude. Like, and I, obviously being a revolting teen, was like, yeah, I'll go into computer science. It's the future. It's the technology, whatever. No interest in computer science whatsoever. And so I proceeded to get pretty miserable grades even after retaking the classes. And I was like, okay, fine, dude, go into dentistry. And so I chose microbiology because of my interest in ecosystems, like I was saying earlier, and how the smallest organisms are actually the ones that have the largest biomass, but they're also the ones that are helping to kind of change all the things into digestible matter for everything else. So I studied microbiology in college, I got into music, and I went into dentistry. And I realized time after time, I was in Temple University dental school, and they do a lot for the community. The community has a lot of problems there in North Philadelphia. And yeah, and they, you know, Temple University does just an absolutely phenomenal job in terms of providing care for these patients and giving them a place to go to resolve their pain and to improve their smiles and all this. But I always felt that being in that location, there's so much more that the university could be doing in terms of helping out local community groups and having partnerships with them, requiring that students have more community service hours, requiring that there actually be partnerships and connections formed And that's kind of where I started hatching this philosophy also about Turan.
Have you ever questioned or thought in depth why? I've always thought why, but what always gets brought up is usually safety. Do you see that there's usually those guidelines set in place just with organizations that are aligned with the college's network just as in safety issues because it's just hard to regulate some of these areas or hard to regulate some of these businesses and the people who are working for them?
I think it's very fair.
Is that what they're, because I could see the college's job as well as to try to protect the students, and if they're allowing them to be exposed in a potential environment of danger, then they could get backlash, and that's not a risk that they want to mitigate because of tuition and how much money they're making. Everything at the end of the day is finances, and not to get controversial, that's why we don't have the cancer cure. That's public. You know, there's been many proven ways to combat cancer, and it works. But why isn't that on a medical scale and publicly available? Because of profit.
It's honestly a wise way to look at it. And I would agree that there is a lot of liability, but I would agree I would state that one of the greatest risks that any organization can make is staying the same. And because everything in our lives and in business and humans and nature is changing, and we need to, as a society, understand that the things that we build are not apart from nature. And you need to have a level of organic adaptability in order to be sustainable. So I agree that, sure, it can be dangerous for students to go out and have these interactions with the people in the neighborhood. But I would also argue, wouldn't they understand their patients better, right? If they went into the neighborhood and understood their problems, wouldn't they get a more well-rounded experience in terms of how to deal with human beings in general? Being doctors and being dentists in particular, like, we're going to be so close to people and their personal just space, right? In terms of that, the other thing is to get out into the community and to see what local leaders are doing despite the heartaches. That could be inspirational for students. And so I think there's a lot of amazing dividends that comes from taking the risk of giving people the raw experience of an area. And mind you, it always was something that came up when these kids that come from richer neighborhoods come to North Philadelphia to dental school. You know, a lot of them don't live nearly like close at all. I used to live right across the street I used to live above the corner store on the corner in North Philly. And so I would hear gunshots and stuff at night. So there was, in terms of how I processed that in my education and how I was evolving my leadership philosophy, I was always so concerned that I don't think the school is giving doctors, which means teacher in Latin, doctor means teacher in Latin, they're not giving the students the tools to become appropriate teachers and pillars in their communities. They weren't seeing it as this incubation, this leadership incubation. They were seeing it as like a dental employee incubation. And so when I came, I did a lot of community service and events and organizations and, but when I came out and I started working at my mother's practice here in Franklin Dental Care and Dentures, Franklin, Ohio, I was like, I refuse to just put the Band-Aid on the medical problem. I don't want to be sitting here and extracting teeth or cleaning teeth or doing fillings without informing people on how they can not make that mistake next time, how they can improve their quality of life by virtue of employing some habits or by changing the way that they think about certain things. And so I said to myself, well, I frankly, as a dentist, oftentimes won't have the time to explain to each individual exactly what they need to do based on their circumstance. But what I can do is make sure that a percentage of what I earn, I actually give back to the community in terms of pushing out the resources and the education needed to educate the general populace on what it means to have good health, or what it means to have prevention in one's life, and for that to be a priority. And so that's the birth of Bright Smiles Community Outreach Coalition. where I brought in the interns of the Turabify Network. They started reaching out to a lot of nonprofits. Their goal is to hand out dental kits monthly. And that became one of my patients actually always overheard me talking about this in the practice. And she would be like, oh my goodness, what are you guys talking about? You know, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? And she's like, you know, I'm here enough. You might as well hire me. She said this in the parking lot one day. And lo and behold, I was like, yo, what are you doing? And then she told me her background, whatever, and I got an outreach coordinator. And lo and behold, she's done absolutely phenomenal. We have delivered over 100,000 kits over the last 4 months of starting this operation, to disaster relief, to people that really don't have access to care, homeless shelters, old people places, schools, pantries, right? And a major part of it is also not only providing the toothbrushes, the toothpaste, and the floss, but also information on how to get access to care, local places that take state insurance, and also the education that's required in order to actually stabilize, if not drastically improve someone's oral health. And I always say also, not to go too far into this right now, but that the mouth is a portal to the body. And if we can fix one part of our body, chances are that we're going to have tremendous amounts of dividends for the rest of it.